Look, I listened today to Parliament. I heard Chris Bowen, the Immigration Minister, introduce this legislation to get around the High Court decision. And I find this whole situation unbearably sad. Now, the Labor Party has not known what to do about asylum seekers since the Tampa, and that was 10 years ago. For 10 years, Labor's struggled, and I think most of the time, Labor's made one great error. It has always tried to be harder and tougher than the Liberals on asylum seekers. You hear the phrase, the race to the bottom. Well, it looks like Labor's won the race. It hasn't won too much lately, but it's won this one apparently. And just look at the history of this. During the election campaign last year, who can forget that magnificent announcement by the Prime Minister that we were going to open up a detention centre in East Timor? Once again, no homework, no work at all on the problem first off. And so within minutes of her making that statement, every politician in East Timor stood up and said, no way. So it was just stupid. Now, of course, she couldn't admit that at the time because there was an election campaign on, so Labor clung on to the farce and kept talking about East Timor for months when everyone knew there was absolute Buckleys that have ever been built. And so when that passed, we finally had an announcement about Malaysia. But once again, no homework. 10 weeks from the announcement to the signing of an agreement. 10 weeks. 10 long weeks. And in politics, you just can't afford that. And that's been the history of this government. You see, what they did when they announced East Timor, what they did when they announced Malaysia, was you had to announce something, anything. You couldn't just look like there was a mess that you couldn't handle. And so they signed the deal in Malaysia. And what happened? The High Court happened, that's what. And they overturned it. And of course the government had left itself no back door. The first reaction of the Prime Minister was to attack the Chief Justice. Now, I don't know about Chief Justice French, he was a Labor appointment, so I doubt very much if he's part of a right-wing plot to overthrow the government. But all that happened was the High Court said no, and it seemed to me pretty reasonably. They said no because there were no guarantees for people in places like Malaysia. They hadn't signed the International Convention on Refugees, and they just simply said no. Well, that left Labor between a rock and a hard place. Now, what Labor should have done was swallow all their pride and go to Nauru. Now, I don't think Nauru will work anyway, but if you believe in all this offshore processing stuff, what choice did they have? They had Nauru and Manus Island in New Guinea, and at least that would hold the fort for a while. I mean, in my view, inevitably, it doesn't matter who's in government, they'll finish up processing them onshore because there are going to be too many of them. But Labor today did just look pathetic. They introduced legislation they know will fail, and that happened after the Prime Minister had a meeting with Tony Abbott on Friday to say, please, Tony, can you get me out of trouble? Could you just get your troops to vote for this for me so I can have the Malaysia solution? Now, think about that. Just think about that. It's breathtaking. Tony Abbott's job is to bring her down, not to save her when she gets into trouble of her own making. Hark back and remember Morris Yema doing exactly the same thing, asking Barry O'Farrell to save him on electricity privatisation. O'Farrell believed in privatisation, but opposition leaders will always find a way around principle when it comes to bowling over the government. And that's what Tony Abbott's doing here. And any thought that Tony Abbott's been wedged into making some sort of unpopular decision here is just nonsense. I don't know what's happened to the capacity of this Labor government to have some idea of political management. It's all gone out the window. I think the last week has been pathetic. But then again, it just comes on the back of a pathetic year.